please tell us your name and the official name of the building or property on the City of Salmon Arm's Heritage Register?
Hi, my name is Bernd Hermanski, and the building we're talking about is the old courthouse building, is what it's known as locally. The address is 20 Hudson Avenue Northeast, and it was when I moved from Vancouver up to Salmon Arm, and I had very recently become registered as an architect, and we were driving around just getting to know the town, and the old courthouse building, was very clearly the most beautiful heritage building in town. And I looked up at the stained glass windows that were the front of the old courtroom on the second floor, and I said to Susan, man, I would just love to have my office in that building one day. And then it took 20 years, but then 20 years later, the building came available. It was owned previously by BC Building Corporation and used as the provincial courthouse. And it was originally built in 1930. And I don't know if you've seen the old photos of it being built. But so it had been around for quite a while, for 70 years or 73 years, I guess, when we saw this opportunity come up to buy it, because BC had decided they were going to build a new courthouse here, which we actually designed as well. And then they decided to divest themselves of the old courthouse. And the city, because it was owned P3, which was public use only, BC pointed out that this would make it difficult to rent out or sell, because new owners would very likely want it to be able to have commercial uses in it. So it had to be rezoned to a C2 zoning. And the city council at that time, and this was just prior to 2003, they said, well, we'll let you rezone it to C2 if you put a heritage designation on the front facade of that building. So that is actually the only building I'm aware of in all of Salmon Arm that has an official, non-negotiable heritage designation, and just on the front facade facing Hudson and Shuswap streets. So anyway, we bought it in 2003, and then the new courthouse was not to be completed till 2006. So we leased it back to the province to keep the courthouse in there for those 3 years while the new one was being built. So then we took it over, they moved out finally, and the building was vacated in 2006. And then we spent over a year and a lot of money renovating that one to make it, more modern in its wiring, its heating, its plumbing, and all new finishes and so on. And then gradually we found tenants that would take various parts of it, and some of those tenants have had a turnover over the years and others not so much. So I have my own office. My architectural office is now in the basement of that building. So I've been there. I was there for 18 years as an owner-occupier, and now I'm in there as a tenant, because 4 years ago we sold it, and then last year it resold again to a third party.
Okay. So that answers my second question. You were an owner, former owner.
Right.
That was how long you'd been associated with it. What specifically was it that initially drew you to the property?
It's a beautiful building. Mm-hmm. I'm in a business where we're designing a lot of very modern stuff, mm-hmm. But it's kind of odd that I live in a heritage house and I work in a heritage office building. There is something charming about them. I mean, we don't build them like they used to, which is in some ways a good thing, in some ways not so good. But I always just thought it was beautiful, great location downtown, and I was just always attracted to it.
Did you make any changes to the property?
We did. We added a wing out the back that contains primarily the elevator lobby and a new elevator. Because one thing we had learned and believed right from the get-go was that you cannot lease space in or rent space in a commercial building of more than one level if it does not have an elevator. You have to discount the upper floor terribly if it has no elevator. So that was one of our high priorities, was get an elevator in there for access to the upper floor and the basement. And so we added that. That was huge. And then inside, as I say, we gutted it. It was all lath and plaster wall finishes. And we took most of them out. There were a few little areas where we were able to save them. There was an old boiler room in the basement that was all lined with asbestos. We had to get that all abated and removed. And then we stripped on the inside in many areas where the brick, it's a 3-wide brick wall at the front, structural brick, beautiful red brick, very likely made by the brick plant down in Enderby back in the day, which no longer exists. But almost every brick building in this area had brick from the Enderby brickyard. And so that brick was visible on the outside all along, but on the inside, somebody had decided to cover it with plasterboard. So we ripped a lot of that off and sandblasted it to bring back the look of brick in some of the main floor spaces especially, and some of the upper floor as well. And a lot of it was underneath the vinyl tile floor that the government had put in over the years, was beautiful clear fur floors, like top quality. So we refinished all of that wherever there was any of that. We added public bathrooms, like a commercial building needs. So that was all modernized, refinished everything. And and we added a wing at one end. So if you look at the design of a building like that, it's from a school of design that is commonly known as the Beaux-Arts School, which is a French Academy of Design in Paris. That was hugely popular and highly regarded back in the day. And almost every Beaux-Arts design is symmetrical. So if you draw a line, whatever you do on this side of the line, you'll do the same thing on that side of the line as a mirror, so it's absolutely symmetrical. Well, looking at that building, I could see that they had started with a plan like that, and it was probably a plan that may have been designed for some other location, even from Eastern Canada. I believe it was designed by a firm in Eastern Canada, and there may be a similar building somewhere in Quebec or Ontario, for all I know. But you could see that they didn't build the one wing because they probably didn't need that much space or ran out of money or whatever. In any case, it was a building that was symmetrical, except this one end was missing. So we added that end, because there was room on the site to do that. And then we were also able to add, as part of that, a new fire exit stair from the upstairs, which didn't exist prior. So to make it code compliant, we did that part. And now it finally looks like what I think it was intended to look like back in 1930.
What words of wisdom would you like to share with people thinking about taking on a building like yours?
Well, it, as has been said many times, renovations, you never know where they're going to end up. So when we first bought the building in 2003, we did a quick estimate of, with some pretty sketchy drawings, we tried to estimate what would we have to put into this to renovate it. And we figured about $600,000. We thought, oh yeah, that's a lot of money. So 3 years later, by the time we actually took it over and could start our renovation, because the courthouse function had moved out by that time, so 2006, 2007, the new estimate was $900,000, so 50% more. By the time we finished it in 2007, we had spent $1.4 million. So more than double what we originally thought it would. So the words of wisdom are just be prepared with a renovation of a heritage building that your renovation costs could go wherever. It's likely to be a lot more than you think it's going to be.
And if you had one word to describe the building, what would it be?
I think it's a lovely building. It's great. Yeah, no, it's. I still think it's one of the hallmark buildings of the downtown and the whole community. Actually, you see, unlike Revelstoke or Nelson, which were wealthier communities because of railroad money and mining money, and they have some very nice buildings. Nelson has, a building designed by Francis Rattenbury, the same guy that designed the legislature in Victoria, for example. Their courthouse and their city hall are designed by him. Beautiful stone buildings. But Salmon Arm was just fruit farmers, not much money, very poor. So our architectural heritage here is very meager and nothing of much quality. but the courthouse was built with government money. And so it was built to a much higher standard than almost everything else that was built in this town at that time. And that's one of the reasons it's a hallmark building. And so, yeah, I still think of it as that.
Lovely. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Gee, should I mention names? I probably shouldn't mention names, but a former city official, an elected city official, when he heard that Doug and John and I had bought that old courthouse building, and he said, yeah, it's too bad it's got that heritage designation on the front, eh? Otherwise you could knock it down and build something nice. And I thought, whoa, glad you got unelected recently. Because that is, you see, I think it's important to keep these heritage things alive in any community so you can see visibly and viscerally the history of what's been there before. And, you know, that's why we all pay big tourist bucks to go to Europe, is to see the old stuff. You know, mostly we go to see the old stuff because it's really a great thing to see where we've come from. That's why these things are important.